Bava Batra, Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. Investment in others or in self. מבריח מנכסי חבירו. Welcome to Binyamin Kleiman. Binyamin's come all the way from Yerushalayim. He's one of your chaverim. He and his chaver don't just listen to the Matmonim every day. They learn. They really study the Matmonim every day, and they discovered it just online. David, if you weren't doing this, then Binyamin and his chaver wouldn't have even known we existed. It's through your efforts and the efforts of the team that make sure that this gets out in an attractive format, that people such as Binyamin and his chaver, Reb Shalom Cook, have been able to participate with all of you. And he's also been the force behind the monthly Yerushalayim Rosh Chodesh year. It's something that he's an entrepreneur from Yerushalayim, he's doing some amazing things in the world of science and business, and is also, he and his chaver, Talmidei Chachamim, very honored to have you with us. So you'll notice that in Bava Batra so far we very seldom started with psukim, as we did in Bava Kama and Bava Metzia. We started with verses from the Torah, but we've already mentioned at the beginning of Bava Batra that Bava Batra is really built on Tzvora. Bava Batra is built on norms, on social norms, on business norms, and on business logic, and not a lot of it is really built on psukim. Today we have a reference to Psukim in Kitete, where we have the din of returning lost property, and you've got to return everything, not just an animal, clothing, any item of your friend. V'chein taseh lechamaro, v'chein taseh lesimlato. You've got to return the lost property of his donkey, of his clothing. V'chein taseh lechol avedat achicha, and so you should do to anything that your friend has lost. Asher tovad mimenu umetzaata, which he has lost and you have found. Lo tuchal lehitalem, you can't ignore it, you can't pretend you didn't see it, you've got to engage in it and you've got to return it to him. Says the Gemara in Bava Metzia, if you see water is coming and it's about to flood somebody's property, you try and stop it, you do something, you don't just stand there. Where it says you've got to return lost property, it doesn't just mean metaltalin, it doesn't just mean movable property that you can pick up and take to him. It also means if you can save him loss. That's what the essence of Hashavat Aveda is. You understand from Rova that Hashavat Aveda doesn't just mean I'm returning something to you that you've lost, it's saving somebody from loss. That's the idea of Avedat Achicha, and that's L'chol Avedat Achicha, L'rabot Avedat Karka. What's that got to do with our Gemara? So our Mishnah said, back on Daf Mem Beis, HaMachazik b'nichsei hager, if a ger dies, he doesn't have any family, technically, halachically. So his property is hefker, his property it doesn't belong to anybody. And in such a situation, if a person comes and claims that property, which is standing vacant, Na'al v'gadaru faratz, he locks the door, he puts a lock on the door, he builds a fence, he breaks open a gate. Kol shehu, even if it's just a small one, harezu chazoka, that is a chazoka, says the Mishnah on Membet. Asks our Gemara, v'chama kol shehu? It says even just a little. How much is a little? Omar Rabbi Yasi, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, Natan tzror v'ho'il, natal tzror v'ho'il. If there's a fence, there's a wall around the property, and he plugged a hole in the wall, or he unplugged a hole in the wall. Hareze chazaka, that's what it means, kosher, just a little bit, that's a chazaka. My natan or my natal, what does it mean? He plugged or he unplugged? Ilem, if it means he put a plug and thereby stopped water coming in and washing away the property, or that he opened a plug so that water that was in the property could flow out, then that's something which he's obligated to do in any case based on the Gemara in Bava Metzia. He's saving his friend from loss. That's not chazaka, that's just doing what you need to do. And what we're talking about, you plug the hole so that the water that's in the property stays there and thoroughly waters the property. Or you unplug it so that water from the river can come in. So you're actually watering the property, you're actually improving the property. That's what the Gemara says. The Rashbam comments that although the Mishnah says we're talking about nichse hager, and nichse hager ka'iv hu adin lekoneh davar mechaviro. This is not only nichse hager, this is also the same kinyanim apply for chazaka if one person sells a property to the other. We'll come back to the other Rashbam. Says the Rimigash, our wonderful master, the Rimigash. What's so interesting is you go back further in the Rishonim, like the Rimigash, we see it in Rashi, what they say seems so simple. It's just a few words here and there, but those few words are just so full, are just so packed if you understand who it is that's saying them. If you found this in the art scroll or whatever, you would read through it. It's a comment. But it comes from the Ri Migash. The Ri Migash says that it's not a comment, it's a shir kloli. He's giving a major shir. That's who the Ri Migash is. What does the Ri Migash say? He says, Klomar, what is this Mavriach Hari? Mavriach Hari literally means you're saving your friend's property from a lion. You see a lion is coming towards the property and you chase the lion away. That's something every person would do. That's called Meshir. That's a form of Meshiv Aveda. So the phrase Mavriach Hari we use often in the Gemara to show saving somebody from potential loss. That Hashavas Aveda doesn't only mean returning his lost property, it means saving him from potential loss. Klomar, that means to say, Davar shu mechuyav min haTorah kidamrinan lechol avedat achicha lerabot avedat karka. You know the Gemara in Bava Batra says the Ri Migash, that what you're doing here is you're fulfilling an obligation of the Torah. The chazaka lo havya, that's not a chazaka. You're doing it for fulfilling for the Torah. A chazaka is only ele b'davar she'eno mechuyav min haTorah lasoto. If you're doing something which the Torah doesn't obligate you to do, then it could be a chazaka. But if you're doing something which the Torah obligates you to do, that's not a chazaka. So why are you doing it if the Torah didn't obligate you to do it? If the Torah obligated you to do it, and I say, what's motivating you? So what do you mean what's motivating you? It's a din in the Shulchan Aruch that you've got to do this. But if it's not a din in the Shulchan Aruch, you don't have to do it. What's motivating you? You're doing it as an act of kinyan. So if I can't attribute your motivation to anything else, I must assume that you're doing this for your own interest, which means to acquire the property, that this is a Maaseh kinyan, is what the Ri Migash says. But look deeply in the Ri Migash and just see what it says, because if you look at the Ri Migash deeply, it's so interesting. If you're not doing it because of a mitzvah, just philosophically, ethically, this Ri Migash is amazing. That if you're not doing it for the Torah, it's not an obligation, then you're doing it for yourself. There are only two forms of motivation. You either do something as an act of service to God, you're doing it because Hashem told you to do it, or you're doing it because you want to do it. If you're doing it because you want to do it, it's self-driven, it's ego-driven. Whether you're doing a chesed for somebody else, whether you're helping somebody else, or if you're not doing it because it's an obligation, because it's a mitzvah, that's gadol ha-mitzuveh v'oseh mimi she'eino mitzuveh v'oseh. If you do something because it's a mitzvah, that's what's driving you. There's no self in it, or there shouldn't be any self in it. But if it's not because it's a mitzvah, there will always be self in it. Even if you're doing it for an ethical reason, you want to help your friend, it's not a mitzvah, you don't have to, but you do it nevertheless. There's always a self-interest in it. The only way to remove ego is to say, I'm doing it, I would do it even if it was against my interests. I would do it even if it cost me. Even if I got no benefit from it, I would do it. Why? Because it's a mitzvah of the Ribono Shel Olam. That's what, then there can be no ego. If it's not min haTorah, if it oseh davar she'eino mechuyav min haTorah la'asoto, vadai lo asa'o ela la'atzmo. You can know that if somebody does something not because it's a chiyuv, you know he's doing it because he's driven by self-interest. And what kind of self-interest? The most likely self-interest is it's a kinyan. He's being koine the field. The field is vacant. He's digging up the field. Why is he doing it? Because he's beginning his ownership of the field. This is his expression of ownership in the field. That's how we'll interpret it. But this idea that if something isn't driven by a chiyuv, like you've got people who talk about, I don't believe in God, I'm a humanist. A humanist means I'm a selfish person. It means I'm an egoist. It doesn't really mean I'm doing it for others. It means I believe it's a good I believe that I should do this for others. I'm at the center of the story. The only way you can take I out of the center of the story is to put God in the center of the story. If you put God as a chiyuv and it becomes a chiyuv, then it's a different thing altogether. There are only two motivations according to the Ri Migash. It's either a chiyuv or it's a personal choice. An amazing Ri Migash. Asks Rabbi Akiva Eiger in Choshen Mishpat. The Shulchan Aruch paskins this way. The Sma brings the Gemara in Bava Batra as the source of that psak. Asks Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and he says the Rosh paskins that way too. Ulefizeh benichse hager kana. So what about the nichse hager? The ger dies, the convert dies, he leaves no family. So now who am I saving from loss? I'm chasing the lion away. For whose benefit? There's nobody's benefit. Nobody owns the field. So clearly, it would be a kinyan. There's no other reason I'm doing it. Even though it's not a mitzvah. In fact, because it's not a mitzvah, I'm not doing it because of a mitzvah. Who am I doing the mitzvah for? Nobody's benefiting from this. The ger is dead and he has no family. The field is ownerless. I now improve the field. Who's benefiting from that? It's clearly a kinyan. And v'tzorechiyun, and he leaves it as a tzorechiyun. What's interesting is that the Yad Ramah asks the same question. It's possible that Rabbi Akiva Eiger didn't see the Yad Ramah. I'm not sure. The Yad Ramah was published 30 years before Rabbi Akiva Eiger's death. It was first published in Slonika. So it could be that Rabbi Akiva Eiger didn't see the Yad Ramah because the Yad Ramah asks the same question. He brings, in the first paragraph, he brings the general approach similar to the Rimi Gash. And then he says, this is, I've explained the Gemara the way most people understand it. As Rabbi Akiva Eiger's question. Certainly a long time before Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and he says, but what about if a convert leaves property? Here there's no mitzvah of the Torah, so the kinyan should work. And what did the Rashbam say? This sugya is talking both about Nichsei Hager, that's clear. The Mishnah says Nichsei Hager, it's talking about the property of a convert. And the Rashbam says, and other property. But it certainly is also talking about Nichsei Hager, asks the Yad Ramah, but in the case of Nichsei Hager, if this property belongs to a convert, you're certainly not doing it because it's a mitzvah, and you're certainly not doing it to benefit another person. So why are you doing it? For your own benefit. If it's your own benefit, that's a chazokah. So why would the chazokah not work? Again, you've got this field, you plug the field, and that way you're stopping flooding of the field. Stopping flooding of the field, says the Gemara, that's Mavriach Hari, you're keeping the lion away, you're keeping the floodwaters away. What's the problem? Explains the Rimi Gash, that's a mitzvah. You're doing it because it's a mitzvah. You're not doing it because you want to. It's not clear that you're doing it in order to own the property. You might just be doing it because you're a frum Jew who loves God and serves God, and there's a mitzvah in the Torah to save other people's property. That's why you're doing it. And that would be the simple reason. It's not clear that you're doing it to own the property. Says the Yad Ramah, but if there's a ger, then there's no mitzvah to do it because there's nobody you're not saving anybody from loss. So you must be doing it for chazokah. And if this sugi is talking about nichsei hager, why do we talk about mavriach hari? And he says that's dafke if it's in front of him, if it's not in front of him, and so on. Ela mistavra dechi kasher lav mitayme de mitzvah kasher. This has got nothing to do with the mitzvah, says the Yad Ramah. Takes a new approach. Ela mishum dechol chazaka detalya behana deahani ba machzik be'ara lo havir chazaka. An incredibly important Ramah. The Ramah says this is a definition of chazakah. This has got nothing to do with motivation. This has got to do with who benefits. If the beneficiary of your action is you, the machazik, the person who's now trying to possess the property, that's not a chazakah. A chazakah is only elahecha de mahani begufa de ara hana'a de lo havishchicha ba mikami hachen. The only time it's a chazakah is if you initiate development of the property which it wouldn't have had before. You're actually developing. You're a developer. That's what you're saying. I own this property. It's my property. I'm developing it. When you develop a property, you're showing ownership. You don't develop somebody else's property. But then it's got to be development. It's got to be doing something for the property that adds value to the property. Irrespective of you, it makes the property a more valuable property. Then you're an owner. Dumya de Gala, and so on. He says, as you can see clearly in the context of the Gemara, but to stop a flood from coming, that's not developing a property. That's just maintaining the status quo. That's protecting the property. That's conserving the property. Chazakah is not conservation. Chazakah is development. There's a difference between conserving and developing. La'ovda or l'shomra, you can conserve the planet, and which you have to do, and you can develop the planet, which is la'ovda, which is what human beings are put here to do. We've been put in the world to develop the world. Development of the world shows ownership. Development of a property shows ownership. If you're just keeping the water away, you're just keeping the line away. That's like building cities. You build a fence, you build a wall, you dig a well. You plow the field. You do something that adds value to the field. A friend of mine who's very big in property told me with all property this is an important yesod. That is, if you're buying a property as a business, only buy a property that you can add value to. Don't buy a property because you think the property will go up. That's speculation. You buy a property because of the value you can add to the property. Where you see an opportunity, value add that somebody else doesn't see, and you're willing to take the risk of developing, that's where there's an opportunity. But not just to be a passive owner of property. And that says the Yad Ramah is the important thing of what chazaka is. You show yourself as an owner when you're willing to invest in the development of the property. For whoever will own this property one day, whether it's me or somebody else, the property will be a more valuable property. So we have the Rimigash and we have the Yad Ramah, two different approaches to what this Kinyan Chazaka is, what this method of acquisition is. According to the Rimigash, that you did it for yourself, for your own benefit, that you didn't do it to be Mekayim a mitzvah. If you did it for your own benefit, what's the benefit? Probably ownership. Says the Yad Ramah, we're not talking about motivation. When you're looking at chazaka, it's not about why you're doing it, it's about what you're doing. Are you developing the property? That's what's in. Or are you saving some money? Are you preventing loss for you or for another owner, for whoever it is? Preventing loss is not ownership. Preventing loss, that's an ethical thing to do. That's something we do normally. That's an instinctual thing. That's survival instinct. To protect loss, that's survival. Even an animal will do that. To protect from loss, even to protect another person from loss. That's instinctual. But to develop, to invest, only a human being. And that's what chazaka is, says the Yad Ramah. You show yourself as an investor, as a developer, that's human ownership, and as a human owner, that's a kinyan chazaka. The Rashbam, before the Rimigash and the Yad Ramah, brilliantly combines both approaches. When you've learned the Yad Ramah and you've learned the Rimigash, you can understand the Rashbam and say, wow, look what the Rashbam is saying. Because the Rashbam says, at the bottom of the first page of the source sheet, מבריח הרי הלמה זה דומה למשיב אבדה. מבריח הרי means משיב אבדה. דכל ישראל מצווים להציל ממון חבריהם מן ההזק, ואין קרוי חזק אלא דומיה דגודל פור שעושה בבניין או כל תיקון. So that would seem on the surface exactly like the Rimigash. That he's doing it because there's a mitzvah in the Torah to do it. You've got to protect one another from loss, and he's protecting his friend from loss. That doesn't mean it's a kinyan chazaka. There's no evidence that this is a kinyan chazaka. That would seem exactly like the Rimigash, but then carry on. The only time it's a chazaka is when you do kol tikun hatzarich lo lasadeh. It's only a chazaka when you do something the field needs. You're adding value to the field. That's the Yad Ramah. So who's the Rashbam holding like? Is the Rashbam is he learning the Gemara like the Rimigash, or is he learning the Gemara like the Rashbam? Kagon mashke mayim, like you irrigate the field, or zomer, or you cut, or zoreh, or you plant, or choresh, or you plow. You add value to the field. So the first part of the Rashbam seems to be like the Rimigash, and the second part of the Rashbam seems to be like the Yad Ramah. So let's then try and understand the Rashbam. So the Rashbam says, if you're doing it for something other than the field, what could that be? That could be you're doing it for your friend. Why would you be doing it for your friend? Firstly, it's a mitzvah in the Torah. Now, the Rimigash made a sweeping statement that if you're not doing it because of mitzvah in the Torah, then you're doing it for yourself. The Rashbam is not going that far. It says you're doing it as it's a mitzvah in the Torah. What happens if you're not a religious person? You've never learned the Torah. You're doing it because you feel an ethical obligation to your friend. It would seem, according to the Rashbam, that still is not a chazaka, because you're doing it for your friend, you're not doing it for the field. The Rimigash said, if you're not doing it because it's an obligation of the Torah, then you're doing it for yourself, and that's a chazaka. The Rashbam doesn't go that far. The Rashbam says any extraneous reason, if you're doing it for God or for others or for anything, the main thing is it's not tikkun hatzarich lo lasadeh. That's what you've got to focus on. And in that sense, he's much more like the Yad Ramah, except he does bring in the idea of the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda as being the core reason. Because when the Torah tells us that you've got to return lost property to your friend, it's not just a mitzvah of the Torah. When the Torah tells us a ben adam, the Xavero, like that, how people are supposed to relate to one another, non-Jewish religions have adopted that too. Because it's an ethical imperative, apart from being a chiyuv. So when the Torah says, according to the Rashbam, the Torah says, return lost property, you're doing it either for ethical imperative or because it's a mitzvah of the Torah. The main thing is, it's not tikkun hatzarich lo lasadeh. You're not adding value to the field. You're not demonstrating yourself as a human developer. You're showing yourself as an ethical, sensitive person who's preventing loss. And in that way, the Rashbam is understanding the Gemara, really crossing the whole spectrum that is covered by the Ri Migash on the one side and by the Yad Ramah on the other. We see the brilliance of the Rashbam. We see the power of thought of the Ri Migash and the world view of the Ri Migash, and we see the Yad Ramah's technical sophistication in saying what determines chazakah is not motivation but fact. Are you protecting, are you conserving, or are you developing? And the idea of chazakah is the essence of human ownership, which is the human being as a developer of the world, as a developer of the planet, and certainly as a developer of the property that you own.